Some time ago, we talked about different ways to fatten a chord or to change that sound.
With that sweet PH spelling that the kids like so much.
Now, one of the ways that we said you could fatten a chord was to just change the sound by playing a different inversion of it. I've got the root position chord. I've got the first inversion. Different sound. I've got the second inversion, which you want to handle with care. There are certain ways to use the second inversion. Most of the time I'm playing root position chords, and all is well. But when I use that first inversion chord, boy, that sounds nice. Sometimes I need to have that second inversion chord, especially as I'm doing these kinds of things. All right, so there are ways to talk about those chords, and when we just use guitar terminology, we don't really have the best system. You know, we'll say that's a C over E. Well, C over E doesn't tell you anything. It just tells you one chord over one note. Well, it could be a C over A, it could be a C over D, it could be a C over F. It doesn't really tell you the nature of the chord. So when we start living in the world of Roman numerals and Arabic numerals, that helps us to explain, oh, that's a first inversion chord. That's not just a C over E, that's a first inversion C chord. You see what I'm saying? The importance of that? All right, so there is a specific nomenclature that we use for these chords. And we want to show you that secret for how to talk about chords. We can then transfer that over to some degree as we talk about Nashville numbers and so forth, but it's really the Roman numeral system that works best for this way of talking about things, okay? The Roman numeral that we have come to know and love so well refers to the root of the triad and how it fits into the diatonic scale that you are in.
Or if you will, what the chord is.
Yeah. So if you're just looking in the hymnal or at the printed music, what you have to do is find all those notes, stack them so that they're in consecutive lines or spaces. Okay. Either way. All
stacked
lines.
Thirds.
Stacked thirds or all spaces. And when you get them in that position, then you know what the root is, because it's always the one that's at the bottom. Okay, so you have to move them up an octave, down an octave, whatever, and eventually you find out it's a triad or it's a seventh chord, and now you know what the root is. That note. Now you find out where that is in the scale that you're in. If you're in the key of E, and it's a F sharp, then it's a 2 chord, because it's got F sharp, A, C sharp, whatever else in it. And
Roman
stack
numeral
it there. 2. Roman numeral 2. So Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's first you have to put everything together, stack them in thirds, and then figure out like what that bottom note is, and it is the number in the scale. Got it?
Easy enough.
Then we have the special nomenclature. In guitar terminology, we put a slash and then we say what the bass note is. But like I say, that doesn't necessarily tell you how that relates to the chord itself. So what if it was in the key of C and it's a first inversion 1 chord? Well, now we use not Roman numerals, but we use Arabic numbers as superscripts or subscripts, and so we stack those numbers up. That's how we write it by hand. And what we do is we count up the intervals above the actual bass note. Okay? Now, we called it a 1 chord because when we changed it around, we found out consecutive lines or spaces that the root was a C. But in truth, E was the bottom note here. So it's not just a 1 chord, it's a 1 over 3. Well, that's the way we talk about it in Nashville numbers. C over E is how we talk about it in guitar terminology. But how we talk about it in Roman numerals is we say it's a 1 chord, as in Roman numeral 1.
But we say it's a 1.
Then we count up the
6.
Yes, we count up the intervals from that bottom note, whatever it is. In this case, it's an E. So you count the intervals, and you say E. Well, there's a G.
That's a third.
That's a third. And then the next note up is a C. Well, that's kind of unusual. It's not 5, 3, 1 like root position. It's 6, 3, 1. It's the
6,
intervals.
3, 1. That's a little different.
Yeah, but there's no sense in saying 3 and 1.
Yeah.
Those are sort of implied. So I just say it's a 1-6 chord. But when I say 1, I mean the Roman numeral. When I say 6, I mean the Arabic number. I mean, you can see that on your page. So that's a first inversion chord. That's the secret code that well-trained musicians use to refer to such things. Now, what about that rare second inversion chord, Daniel? What happens there?
Well, we're just going to count up the intervals, and you see from, if it's a C chord again, and Roman numeral 1 chord, then you have G in the bass, and you count up to that first note, and you see it's a C. Interval of a fourth.
Fourth, right.
Next one is an E, interval of a sixth.
Sixth.
So instead of a 5-3-1 chord, you have a 6-4-1 chord. Again, we can discount the 1 that's implied. Obviously, you have the 1.
The 1, because it is itself.
Yeah.
So you call it a 6-4. So that would be then a 1 Roman numeral 6-4. You're at the 6 over the top of the 4. You can see it there on the right side of your page, and so we call that a 1-6-4 chord, or a tonic 6-4 chord.
Second inversion.
So now we know it's not just a C over G, like G is some note out of nowhere. No, G is a member of the chord, and it's a second inversion of that.
Plus, this tells you how the chord functions. If you just saw a C over G, that could function several different ways, but using Roman numerals and this nomenclature, you can see, a 6-4 chord, there's only certain ways that a 6-4 chord will function.
So it's not just a C over G. No. It's a 1-6-4 chord. It is of some help in some certain circles. As we told you at the beginning of this course, we won't tell you anything that isn't important, but we will tell you everything that you need to know as a worship leader. So this is something that you do need to know, and the reason that you need to know it is if you need to then turn around and transpose that. Say your guitarist, you're in the key of C, but your guitarist is capo to up 7 and is playing in G and says, C over G, what is that? And you'll say, well, that's a 1-6-4 chord. You're playing in G, so it's a 1-6-4 in G. He says, oh, thank you so much. That helps me a lot. Now I'll just play a G over D, because that's a 1-6-4 in my key. And everybody can get along and live in harmony with one another. And there is musical peace, because somebody knows music theory. You do. You know music theory. You know that's not just a C over G. No. You know that's a 1-6-4.
That's a 1-6-4 right there.
Well, as you can see on your page, there is also fancy nomenclature for 7th chords. And root position you call a 7, just like we do with guitar terminology. First inversion we call it a 6-5. Second inversion we call it a 4-3. And third inversion we call it a 4-2. Okay, so you don't really need to know all those numbers, like to set those things to memory, but it's nice to be able to use that terminology. So from now on in this course, from time to time, we'll use that kind of terminology, and you'll be able to refer back to this lesson and say, when they say 5-6-5.
That's what they're saying.
Oh yeah, that's that first inversion of a 7th chord. That's what that is. So there you have handy nomenclature using Roman and Arabic numerals in order to describe not only what a chord is, but more importantly, how it's functioning within the key that we're in. Remember, everything goes from unstable notes to stable notes. Sooner or later, we're going to resolve to a tonic chord. In the meantime, where are we, and how does it relate to the next thing? Roman numerals, wonderful explanation of how all that works.
Brilliant!